Okay, time for another screencast-o-matic presentation that we're going to be using for Flipped Classroom. This one shouldn't take too long, so I'll try to get started right away. It's titled The Federal Judicial System, and it talks about the Supreme Court and its role in our government. Now would be a good time to pause the video and get set up for Cornell notes. So, as we move forward, you don't have to copy this down, but you should remember lazy elephants jump slowly and sleep regularly acronym. The acronym stands for the 7 articles in the Constitution, the first article establishing Congress, the second, the executive branch, and so on. Today we're going to talk about the 3rd article in the Constitution, which established the judicial branch. So this should be something that's familiar to you guys. If not, I'd copy it down, but at this point it should be. You guys should realize that the legislative branch is headed by Congress, which is 2 parts, House of Representatives and the Senate. The executive is ran by the president, the vice president, and all of the executive departments, and the judicial branch is ran by the Supreme Court. So right now at the top part of your notes, I want you to write the answer to a quick key review question. What does the legislative branch do? Write down your response. This will be a good way for your teacher to check and make sure you did the assignment. To do that quickly, pause the video while you're writing that down, and then we will move on when you're ready. So, some basic facts about the judicial branch. The Constitution set up only the Supreme Court, but created power to make additional courts as needed, which were definitely used. The Judiciary Act of 1789 set up the lower courts, such as the District Court, Circuit Court of Appeals, and local court systems for each individual state. The Supreme Court means it is the highest court in the nation. So no matter what Supreme Court says, it becomes the law. There are 9 justices, and justice is a fancy way of saying judge if you're on the Supreme Court, and there are 9 total, and the Chief Justice is John G. Roberts. Hint, that might be on your test later. The Chief Justice, being John G. Roberts, the newest justice is Sonia Sotomayor. This is the first Hispanic to serve on the Supreme Court, and she was appointed by President Obama. All of our Supreme Court justices are given their appointments by the President, and their appointments are confirmed by Congress. A verdict is a vocabulary word which means the written explanation of the thinking on the court's decision. So when the 9 justices make a choice and they're voting on how they want a specific Supreme Court case to go, they write a verdict, which is a written explanation on their thoughts. This is going to be one of those important words you want to make sure you have on your Cornell notes. Now we have 2 main types of law. We have criminal law and we have civil law. Criminal law defines basically what crimes are. If you break a law, meaning a crime, like you steal a car or you rob a bank, that is criminal law. There's also civil law, which settles disputes between people, like when someone sues someone else, or if you guys have ever seen Judge Judy, that's all civil law. 2 totally different types of law. Now, there's a term that you guys may have heard earlier in the year that's important for you to know, and it's called rule of law. And that states that everyone has equal protection under the law, and also everyone has to follow the law. Everyone from the president and down to every citizen you've ever heard of. Under our Constitution, laws exist to promote the common good, and courts exist because people break laws. Otherwise, we wouldn't need them at all. Now, it's important to make the difference between the 2 types of law and the 2 sources of law. The 2 types of law, every court case can be split into those 2. But our sources of law are where those laws come from. Our 4 main sources of law include statutory, which are laws passed by lawmaking bodies, common law, which comes from judges' decisions. They rely on common sense and precedent for an earlier decision. I don't know what that 9's all about right there. Administration or regulation law are made by government agencies, and they're the ones who take care of stuff like food safety. Constitutional law is based on the Constitution and Supreme Court decisions. And those are the 4 that affect everybody. But you can also see up here, there's also military law, which is a special set of laws that apply only to those serving in the armed forces, like the Army, Navy, or Air Force, that sort of thing. All court systems, either at the state or federal level, have to follow all Supreme Court decisions, which, as you can see, is right in the center here. The court system describes how the Supreme Court is the highest court in all the land. Now, if you're in a U.S. district court or a state district court, you can appeal if you're not happy with it all the way up to the Supreme Court if they decide to take your case. All cases involving the violation of federal laws are tried in U.S. district courts. District courts also hear cases involving U.S. states or foreign nations. If a party or a group is not satisfied with a district court decision, they may appeal to the Court of Appeals. The U.S. Court of Appeals only has appellate jurisdiction, which jurisdiction means authority, which means they can only rule on a lower court's decision. So you won't ever see a state Supreme Court overriding a federal Supreme Court. They also don't try new cases. All of the new cases have to start on a lower level and can appeal all the way up to the higher courts. If that doesn't make sense to you, go back and check out this graph. In fact, it would be a good idea for you to copy down this graph of the U.S. court system. Okay, when it comes to making a decision, if the Supreme Court does take your case, it makes a decision, and that's something called a precedent, which means once that precedent is set, that's the rule going forward. So if the Supreme Court decides that you are not allowed to segregate, that is a precedent. From that point forward, you're breaking the law if you go against that precedent. Now, the role of the Supreme Court, now that we talked about how a court case can get to the Supreme Court, the role is having original jurisdiction in cases involving state governments against each other or foreign diplomats. A diplomat is any representative that goes from one country to another and represents their original country in that new country. The Supreme Court has two important functions, which are to review all laws passed by both federal and state government, and if any law is found to be unconstitutional, it is struck down, kind of like a veto. It also serves as the final court of appeals, so if an appeal is heard all the way up through the Supreme Court, once a decision is made in the Supreme Court, you can't override that or appeal that any further. Some basic facts about the Supreme Court are that it hears very few cases every year. It's only in session from October through June. Decisions are determined by a majority vote, which is the reason why there's an odd number of justices, right now 9. And justices, as I mentioned before, are appointed, meaning given their job by the President and confirmed by the Senate. They get to keep their job for life and can only be removed by impeachment. And in over 200 years of our country, no justice has ever been impeached or removed from office. So it's a pretty great job once you get it. You only work from October to June, and no one can take your job away from you, and you get it till the day you die or retire. That's it. I know it's a lot of information, and I know it's condensed into a short period, so if you need to go back and review your notes or re-watch the video, please feel free to do that. If you have any questions for your teacher, you can email them, and they'd be happy to answer them for you.